Hello and welcome to Zoology Live 2025. I'm Roz and I'll be your guide today as we explore all things insect. Why insects? They are amazing animals and we are partnering with the Amateur Entomologists Society this year to give you even more insights into the world of these marvellous mini beasts. We have some great stuff lined up for you today. Later, we'll be joined by a very special guest, Dr Erica McAlister, Principal Curator of Flies at the Natural History Museum in London. She is ready to answer all your burning questions about these fascinating creatures. We're going way beyond blue bottles and crane flies today. But first, we wanted to explore some of the different ways we can study insects out in the field. So here is Professor Ed Turner, our Curator of Insects here at the Museum of Zoology, showing a technique used to study the insects and other mini beasts living in long grasses and other plants, sweep netting. And spoiler alert, there are some really rather beautiful beetles in this one.
Hi, my name's Ed Turner. I'm Curator of Insects here in Cambridge in the Museum of Zoology. And we're in a fantastic meadow area again in the centre of Cambridge. And what I wanted to do now was show you a different sort of collection technique for insects. I'm going to show you a variety of different techniques in these short videos. This one is using this special sort of net, which is called a sweep net. Now it's not like a butterfly net. Butterfly net's really fine, so make sure it doesn't damage the butterfly's wings. This one is actually kind of really tough. And that's because it's used to sweep through vegetation. It's sweeping through the vegetation to knock off insects. And ecologists use this technique quite a lot to carry out standard counts of insects, so we can work out how diverse different environments are and compare them. But you can use something like this just at home as well, and really any net will do, but I've got a proper sweep net here because it can be a bit tougher. I've got a nice patch of long vegetation and grass here. This is stinging nettles. Obviously, if you use stinging nettles, do be careful not to get stung. I'm going to keep my hands well away from it as I do it. And I'm going to show you the sweep netting technique. So I've got the net here. I'm going to move back and I'm going to move towards you a little bit as I do it. So I'm going to choose this patch here. Often people would just do 5 standard sweeps or something like that. I'll do a few more so we bump up the number of insects I can show you afterwards. So I'm going to get in, got the net open here, and I'm going to go right in and you really whack. So I'm properly knocking off any insects found in these areas. Actually I can see insects flying off, so I've done quite a lot. Now I'm going to keep the net moving as I'm talking to you. Of course the reason is that keeps insects right in the bottom of the net, make sure they can't escape. And then I'm going to seamlessly grab it and give it a little twist. That means all the insects are now in the bottom of the net. And we should be able to show you exactly what we've caught. You can see this okay. If I open it up, I've caught some stinging nettles, it's good news. I've knocked off the top of these, but not too much. So look inside, oh wow, look at that. Can you see that? If I move these out of the way, I'm going to try and not take the insects with them as well, because there's lots of insects actually on the stinging nettles. Get rid of those. Look at that, absolutely fantastic haul. So these beautiful ones here, these green ones, are weevils, and they've actually got little hairs or scales all over their skin, all over their wing case, which is called elytra, which is what's giving them this beautiful green coloration. I suspect that's probably to make sure they're really nicely camouflaged, so they're really difficult to see, and they'll be feeding on the plants themselves. Absolutely beautiful beetles, and loads of them there. Look at all those. We've got some beautiful spiders. I'm pointing out this one here, it's just walking around. It's got quite long legs. This is a kind of crab spider. This is quite interesting as well. This is a group of spiders that can often change their colour. So they can change from being brown to yellow to green sometimes. So lots of different colours. Again, to do with camouflage, but probably to stop them being seen by things they want to eat, in this case. We've got another type of weasel here, a little long-nosed weevil. So another beetle here, which is kind of crawling up. These little green things, a green fly, much loved by gardeners all over the country. But these will be feeding on the stinging nettles themselves as well. The top here, we've got a true bug, a little myriad bug. It's a plant-feeding bug, so a different group of insects. The way to annoy an entomologist is to refer to all insects as bugs. Bugs are a particular type of insect, so beetles are a type of insects called Coleoptera. Bugs are a type of insects called Hemiptera. Oh, that little thing just flew off. I don't know if you saw that. That was actually a tiny wasp. And then look at the bottom here. I'm not even trying yet. That massive life we've got. That little black ant is probably Lasius niger. It's the black ant, the common black ant. That will probably be on the stinging nettles, feeding on the aphids. They actually look after aphids, and they feed on their poo really, which is honeydew, which is very sugary and sweet. So you often get black ants and these green aphids together. And then there's some snails in here as well. Let's see if there's any larvae or anything. A proper true fly here. Loads of different orders. So hopefully you can kind of see absolutely masses and masses of stuff, but not just lots of one thing, actually loads of different, very unrelated types of insects. We've got predators like, not insects, but arachnids, predators like that spider. We've got lots of different types of beetles. We've got that true bug, we've got flies, we've got little wasp which kind of flew off, which will be laying its eggs on or in other insects. All sorts of things, all doing their own thing, hidden in amongst these nettles, and you can only really find them by using sweep netting like this.
Aren't those mint green weevils just gorgeous? And colour changing spider, how cool is that? Now we love going sweep netting here at the museum and seeing those magical things you can find when you look that bit closer at nature. Inspired by this, members of our Young Zoologists Club put on their creative hats a couple of weekends ago and made minibeast puppets. Here are the rather brilliant results. Love that. The butterflies, the caterpillars, the beetles, even a leaf insect and a praying mantis. So they're not UK species, but they are such fabulous insects. What would you choose to make as a mini beast puppet? Perhaps this next film will give you some ideas. Here is Ed showing us a technique to look at the insects living in trees and shrubs, beatnetting.
Hi, my name's Ed Turner. I'm Curator of Insects in the University Museum of Zoology in Cambridge. And we're here on the Cambridge Backs having a look at this patch of scrub. And what I want to show you is the kind of insects that can live in this sort of environment. And that's low trees and shrubs, and there's lots. This is an elder here, and you can see it's just beginning to come into flower. You can see that. So there's going to be lots of things actually feeding on the flowers, on the leaves, and of course lots of other insects and spiders and things like that feeding on those insects. So it's almost a whole ecosystem in its own right. With insects it can be like that. The environment's a very patchy place because they're so small, so you can get whole communities of things living in quite small areas. The trouble is, because they're small, they're actually quite hard to see. So you need to have some kit to allow you to catch them and actually see them, get up close and personal to these insects. And what I'm going to use here is something called a beating tray. But to be honest, you could use anything. You could use a sheet, or you could use a white tray, or you could seal a tray from your cooker. That will do very well as well. And what we're doing is we're going to put this underneath these plants. So I'm leaving it flat here. You can see it's got a little bit of a kind of base to it, so things get caught inside. And another very technical piece of kit, which is a stick I've just found just down the way. So I'm going to give this a good old bash. So I'm going to put it underneath here. You can see this. So try not to let the insects go away too much. And I'm going to hit it very hard. So I'm going to beat up the tree. I'm going to do a few more over here just to increase our chances of getting some different insects. Oops, caught in a bramble there. Let's have a look. So if I bring this up close, I'll see if we can see what we've caught. I'm going to come down, if that's all right. So you can see we've got lots of elder we've caught, but look at that. Can you see lots of things scurrying around on the surface here? So actually we've caught tons and tons of really tiny insects. Again, I wasn't hitting it that hard and I didn't do this for very long. So it gives you an idea of just the sheer amount of things that you can get. There's a spider disappearing off the side here, obviously a predator. So this will be here to eat lots of insects which are living in on this plant. We've got this little tiny scuttly thing here, I don't know if you can see that. So I'm just wandering along here. Little tiny scuttly one, there's quite a few of those. That's a book louse or a bark louse. Obviously there aren't books up in the trees, so it's not feeding on books, but probably will be feeding on lichen and fungi and things growing on the surface. Actually, there's quite a pretty one there. It's another book louse there. You can see with these beautiful patterned wings. Little poke. Little tiny thing, I don't know if you saw that, it just disappeared, kind of said hello to the book louse and disappeared off. That was something called a springtail. So that's a non-insect hexapod. I mean, it's a six-legged thing which isn't an insect. It's a group that branched out before insects became insects. And they've got the most amazing thing, adaptations, which is a spring. So hence springtail means literally they've got a spring in their tail and they can jump out of the way if predators try and eat them. It's a really clever way of doing that. Now if you can see here, there's a springtail there. If I give it a little poke, we won't do it. But let's see if I can make him. Oop, it's going to jump. No. Impossible. But they can jump a long way. This one would be able to jump right out of this tray if it wanted to. Obviously I'm not being convincing enough in looking like I'm trying to eat it. And then if we look even closer in here, can you see if I move it around, agitate it a little bit, there's other tiny things in here as well. That little one there, there's a little tiny weeny long-nosed weevil. That's a little green fly there, or black fly, so kind of an aphid, which will be feeding on the plant itself, on the sugary stuff within the plant. Long-nosed weevil again. Another little tiny spider there, so another predator. Absolutely loads of things. And that wasn't very long that I was doing that beat sampling, but again you can see all this suite, this whole group, this whole community of insects living up off the ground in these plants.
Now, I was rather taken with that pretty bark louse with the stripy wings. And as for the jumping springtails, it just goes to show even the tiniest mini beasts are fascinating. We've now only a few minutes away from being joined by our special guest this evening, fly expert extraordinaire, Dr Erica McAlister of the Natural History Museum in London. So do get your questions ready for her in the comments on YouTube. And to get your curiosity juices flowing, here are a few of the flies we have in the collections of the Museum of Zoology. Pop into your garden or a park and you're likely to run into a fly pretty soon. There are thousands of species of fly alive in the world today, coming in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Here are a few from the collections of the Museum of Zoology. First up, a marmalade hoverfly, named for its hovering flight. The striped markings on the abdomen may make this look like a wasp, but unlike wasps, it has no sting. Our hoverfly has a huge pair of eyes, but these eyes look totally normal compared to these eyes. Where are the eyes in this fly? Either on the ends of the enormously long stalks sticking out of the head of this stalk-eyed fly. Its eye span is greater than the length of its body. The eye stalks are longer in males. It seems the females find it attractive. Although this animal looks like a bee, it's another deceptive fly. This is a bee fly, and it is a bumblebee mimic. And the long structure sticking out of the front, that's its proboscis for drinking nectar. And last but not least, a fly that hitches a ride on a bee. Browler is a wingless fly, also known as a bee louse. It has comb-shaped feet to grasp onto the bristles on a bee's abdomen or thorax. There, just 4 of the world's amazing flies, and there are many, many more here at the museum. but I'm going to get straight on by welcoming Erica. So hello.
Hi, how's
Hi.
everyone? Hi.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. So I've got a couple of questions I'm going to start with, and it looks like we're already getting some questions from our audience, which is fantastic. So I'm going to start off by asking you, what was it about flies that kind of caught your interest?
It's everyone is like, why, Erica? Why flies? What on earth? Why don't you like something like butterflies? Well, because flies do everything and answer every question. I'm really, really nosy and I'm really inquisitive, and you can pretty much guarantee that wherever you look, there will be a fly there. So these are the world's explorers. You know, they climb mountains, they scuba dive, they live in the Arctic, the Antarctic. They were the first animals in space. They answer that, you know, they've got their little tarsa in every ecological niche, and they love it, and they look fabulous. So most people have a misconception about a fly looking just like a housefly, when there's just such a multitude of form. It's brilliant.
Oh, that does sound the first animals in space. That's amazing. What is it that actually makes a fly? Because there's loads of things that have the word fly in their name, like
Oh, I know.
butterfly and dragonfly. What is an actual true fly? What makes
I
it?
love it. Dragonflies, not dragons, not flies. There's loads of that. So that's the problem with common names. So with a lot of the insect orders, for example, when you have something like dragonfly, if it's one word, it's generally not a fly. Now I
Ah,
say generally because people have been lazy across time, and so when they've written houseflies, they've written it as one word when it really should be two words. So
right.
to be an actual fly, like all insects, you have three pairs of legs, you have three body parts, and you have mouth parts on the outside. Now, in flies, their mouth parts are all suctorial. So you can't actually be bitten by a fly. So as many people go, oh gosh, these mozzies bit me, this horsefly bit me. They can't bite. They have got this, they can slice and pierce and cause maim and destruction that way, but they're all suctorial mouth parts. And then they will have one pair of wings in comparison to like the bees and the beetles and the bugs, which have two pairs of wings. And instead, they have what's called a pair of halteres. And these are balancing organs. And these enable flies to be the most supreme aerial beings. So they can loop the loop, they can yawl, they can roll, they migrate millions of miles, you know, obviously not millions because we haven't got them, but they migrate vast distances. So they are absolutely amazing. But not all flies have wings. Not all adult flies have mouth parts. And not all flies have those little halteres, just to be a bit sneaky.
Okay. So there are flies that can't fly then, which seems a bit of
Yes.
a
So
yes.
there's some flies that never could fly as the adult stage, and it's the only adult stage we're thinking of here. But there's some flies that did start off with wings, and then they've ripped their wings off. Yeah, your face is great. So, oh, what?
The thought of ripping
Um,
off your wings if you've got them.
oh my gosh, no, there's a fly that not only rips off its wings, it rips off its leg, and then
Yeah.
basically gets its bottom and covers itself with its bottom. It wraps its bottom round its body. I mean, it's an extreme fly, I'm not going to lie, but they're quite amazing.
Oh, that sounds incredible. I just can't quite picture it. I'm going to have to look that
So
one up.
I've sent you an image of a fly with no wings.
Okay.
It looks a bit like a spider, just so everyone can see it.
I'll just see if I can go through the pictures that you sent to me. Because I don't think that was the first one, was it? Is it?
No, it's the
Is
third
it
one
that
I
one?
sent.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a little batfly, and I love these flies, and I've spent quite a few months in the Caribbean, thank you
Oh.
taxpayers, collecting these off bats. So not only do they look really weird, their head, if you can actually see it, it's actually popped backwards over the back of their thorax because they've got no wing muscles anymore. So the head, to protect it when it's not feeding on the bat, it kind of pops back in place. And what is amazing about these flies, not only do they look really weird and they've got funky feet to hold onto the fur, they get pregnant. So
What?
they give birth to live young.
God.
So she's got internal lactating glands, so she properly nurtures her little maggots. It's so cute.
Wow, I've never heard of a lactating fly before. That's
I know,
amazing. That's
I know. It'd be the
fantastic.
new fad, or
Yeah.
the rage next
The
year.
rage, yeah.
Everyone will be doing it in 2026.
Yeah.
Latte with fly milk.
Yeah. So that sort of brings me on to my next question is how diverse are flies? Because you're saying there's loads of different sort of lifestyles we've got there. How many species are there? Because I think a lot of our viewers will probably be very aware that there are more species of insects described than anything else. And out of that, people often think beetles are the most diverse group.
Yeah.
How do flies
So,
stand up to that, do you think?
well, this is the Beatles had they had exceptionally good champions, and people like Chas or Charles Darwin, as you actually know, and Wallace, and beetles are quite easy to describe. You can, and the same with butterflies and moths. You can have a look at their structure and their colour and their form, and it's very easy. The problem is when you move into the two groups called the dark taxa, and these are bees, wasps, and ants, and flies. And these, you often get thousands and thousands of species that are all tiny little black things, and you have to do things like genitalia dissection. So at that point, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
So if we think about animals described on the planet, most of the animals described are insects. I think we're about 80% of all animals described are insects. Now, within those insects, you have the 4 mega orders, which the most described today are the beetles, and then you move on to the butterflies and moths, and then you move on to the Hymenoptera and the Diptera. But we know this is just a temporary stage, because, for example, in the UK, there are more described species of fly than there are beetles and butterflies and moths put together.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
when we really start going around the world and properly getting to grips with how many species are, we will be laughing at the beetles. So yes, you think you had a lot, but let's talk real figures. So they're those with the Hymenoptera, the bees, wasps, and ants. They're the two groups that we're like, we have got to get to grips with this. We've spent 300 years or so, and we've only described, I think, 185,000, where 400,000 beetles have been described.
Right.
But we've got 7,000 species of fly in the UK, which is more mammals on the planet.
Yeah.
So, most animals, are going to be these insects. They're statistically, it's more likely to be a fly than many things.
So maybe we can encourage some of the people viewing today that maybe they'd like to come into become a fly expert themselves and help with all the naming of species that needs to be done.
And the thing about the UK is is the most described country, and there are some amazing organisations to encourage more people. So I'm an active member of the Dipterus Forum, which is just a load of fly fanatics. Right now, I know they're up in the Cairngorms in Scotland, running around like idiots, having the best time, trying to figure out where all these flies live, what they do, look at the larval stage, look at the host records, and then we add all of this information, and every year they go off to different places, just building and building and building on this information. And then I go off abroad and we are describing new species, and it's so much we have to learn about these amazing creatures.
Yeah, no, it's getting me inspired, definitely. It's great. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions from our audience, and then I've got a few more things I'd quite like to ask you. So I've got one question from Dave, and Dave asks, how much of the NHM's flies collection is available for public viewing? There seem to be lots of videos showing people getting access to all sorts of interesting stuff, but not much seems to be accessible.
Yeah, so we have a 1% on display of all across the board, and there is many reasons for this. One is, weirdly enough, and I have no idea why this is, the average person has no real interest in looking at our maybe 3 million specimens of flies. I don't know why, but there is that. We are trying to put more on display, and we are opening up new galleries and trying to get into that. Secondly, it's a big research collection. So we send millions of flies in the post, which always, it's never ceased to amuse me. And we have visitors from all around the world who are accessing it. And I would take lots and lots of images, digital loans. So they're always going in and out of collections. It's where the researchers are. And we, along with Cambridge and various other institutes, are now all trying to digitize our collection. So we are trying to, because it's not accessible to most people, is to bring the collections online. So over the next 10 years, we're going to digitize 30 million specimens in the museum, of which 20 million are insects. So I'm going to go potty in the next 10 years, putting tiny little barcodes on, ready to be imaged and ready to be accessible for free across the world for everybody.
Oh, it's fantastic, and making all that data available to scientists everywhere.
Absolutely. So this data, they go back, 200 years, 300 years across everywhere. So we can start doing massive projects. And it's not just our museum, it's across, the whole of Europe. And we just looked at British museums. There's 134 million specimens in collections across the UK. Bang on Europe, bang on America, bang on, all these different continents. And just think of the wealth of information.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That'd be amazing to get all of that available. So I've got a couple of questions here that are more general insect questions. I hope that's okay to ask them. If you don't want to answer them, we can get them answered elsewhere as well. But been asked, and these are people I think we can persuade to get into flies a bit more. We've got, what is the biggest butterfly? And also, I love rhinoceros beetles. So if there's anything you know about rhinoceros beetles. My third one that is a non-fly question is, what are katydids? So I don't know if you can add to any of those.
Now, butterflies is a bit of a misnomer because all butterflies really are moths.
Yes.
Okay, so if you want the big moths, they're the atlas moths, they're some of the bigger one, and the lunar moths and things like that. I saw some of those collecting. Whilst I was collecting, and there was rhinoceros beetles as well. And I have a little video of one running across my hand. I say little video, it's quite a big video. But I'm going to link this to a fly, because one of my favourite flies, which is an enormous fly, is the rhino bot fly. And this fly, the larval stage, lives in the stomach of a rhino, which is a bit of, I don't know if that's a good habitat or a bad habitat. But the adults are enormous, and they're really charismatic looking creatures. And they're like black and red, and they look really, really hardcore, but they are wimps. And that's a lot of insects. The ones that look really vicious, like the rhino beetle, it's just a wimp, really. I mean, they're quite strong. And the third one, what a katydid, that's an American term for what we call longhorned bush crickets. So they're a type, they're cricket closely related to grasshoppers.
Right, fantastic, thank you. So I've got a couple of fly questions now. One from
Marvellous.
Lenny. Lenny asks, what is the biggest fly?
Right, so it depends how you do it. So if we were going to go legs, right, it's a crane. Eggs immediately. And it's called a Holorosia, I think is the genus. They're found in China, and they are, if I was to spread my hand out, so if you spread your hand out, if I could, like that. Now spread your fingers out further and your thumb out slightly further. That's like the leg span. They're enormous.
That is massive.
I know.
Yeah.
So that's those. But when it comes to like chunk and girth, they're in a group called Mididae. And there's a Jeremias heros. These things are about like 7-8 centimeters long. And what is wonderful about some of these is they spend years as a larvae. And they're like eating terrible food like rotten wood, which, it just doesn't do a lot for them. So they spend years developing before they become these massive adults who then have a couple of weeks to live. All that effort for a couple of weeks.
Gosh, yeah, wow. Okay, got a question about halt ears now. So what is going on inside halt ears, and how do they help the fly? That's asked by Joseph.
Right. Okay, Joseph, imagine you're on a motorbike. Okay, you're gripping onto the handlebars, and as you turn the handlebars, the bike is being steered. Now, these halt hairs are kind of a bit like that. They're what we technically call proprioceptors. So when the wind hits them in a certain way, they know the angle, they know the speed of the wind, and they can communicate this through their nervous system and tell their wings to go left, go right, stabilize, do that. Don't ever do this, but if you cut them off the flies can't even walk properly, let alone fly.
Really?
So they have this kind of like little, maybe a horse rider with stirrups, maybe, holding onto the reins, and as you steer, what's going on. So they are amazing little, very, very sensitive organs that their ever so slight movement tells the fly exactly what's going on. So hence why flies can hover, land upside down on the ceiling, do all sorts of crazy stuff.
Okay, that's a great description of it. Thank you. We've had another question. You've already mentioned this. I'm going to ask it slightly differently. So how many flies are there in the UK? So I'm going to change that slightly to not just how many flies are there, but are there any particular flies that have got like interesting, that people might see that have a surprising, yeah, they're all interesting.
All of them.
But are there any that are common that people might be surprised by their lifestyle or something like that?
Okay, go for photo number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, photo number 2. This little cutie. Okay, this is Bombilious discilla. Okay, this is one of the bee flies, and we have quite a few bee flies, of which within this genus, I think we have 5 species, I can't remember. And this one is called discilla because it's got little dots on its wings. Now, this bee fly, look at it, it's got a really long proboscis, really long mouth part. It's really cute. It's massively fluffy. I took a photo of one of these just sitting on its bum, which always just made me, I was like, we've all just needed to just sit down and relax.
Yeah.
But and this is a female because she's got a gap between her eyes. If you look there, she's got a bum bag. So she twerks. So she has this little bum bag where she twerks for sand. And when she lays her eggs midair, they will go pass through this sand chamber, this brood chamber, get coated in sand. And so when she hurls her eggs around the garden, maybe not so good a mum, but very amusing for me, they are able to not desiccate so much, a little bit of weight, because the larvae, the eggs then hatch, the little larvae, no legs, remember, it's like, and off it goes to try and find whatever it wants to eat. And some of these feed on solitary bees, some of these feed on caterpillars, etc. And the larvae themselves go through 2 different life stages, life forms. One is like a toddler, it's like it's got to get to the food. Off it goes, no legs, charging around till it finds its food. And what it's looks quite sneaky as well, which I've got to admire, is that these bees have often been left with food supplies, the larvae. It eats them first before it eats the bees. But then the larvae changes form into basically a teenager who just then doesn't do anything, just eats and eats. He doesn't move, he doesn't do anything. It's like, And just before it changes, just before it goes through the metamorphosis, it leaves wherever it is to go to the surface where it pupates. And then these beautiful adults appear. And these adults have a different form of life cycle, diet, because these are pollinators. So they're all nectar feeders.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's great about flies, is that you often find the larval stage lives in a different habitat, eats different things in comparison to the adults. And if you think that one's cute, go to the first photo.
Okay, there we go.
Look at that.
That is
It's like it's very cute, isn't it? It's a little powder puff.
Yeah.
I vow anyone not to like a fly, and I'm like, look at that. And this, as you can see on the label, this is found in South Africa, and this is another bee fly. It's the same genus as our little dotted one, and it's just adorable. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, they are very, very cute flies. Because I was going to ask you about cute and fluffy flies, and you think you've totally delivered with those.
We've got, I love it. There's loads of flies with moustaches. There's loads of flies. There's the hipster flies. They've got beards.
Yeah.
These are just, powder puffs. So, if you imagine seeing these like huge, it's like, it would just be this massive, fluffy, winged fluffy monster coming. And I'm like, they're so cute.
Yeah, that's a lovely fly. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. We've got another question from somebody in the audience saying, what are the this is a bit existential, this question, and they're asking, what are the evolutionary advantages of being an invertebrate versus something else?
So, invertebrates, you get defense. Okay, so you've got an exoskeleton which protects you. So, I mean, that gives with one and takes with the other, because obviously you have growth restrictions and things like that. You can reorganize your tissues quite quickly. I think that's a nice thing. So they go through, most animals on the planet go through this complete metamorphosis. So they can have a larval form, which is completely adapted, and then they can just dissolve that larval form and redo their skeleton. Whereas we're kind of stuck. It's harder. Can you imagine if we dissolved either our outsides or our insides? It just would become quite difficult.
Yeah.
So they are able to get in this and develop different structures, so they can have huge amounts of strength associated to them because they have this exoskeleton. The idea of like the wing muscles are either directly or indirectly attached to these skeletons, so they're very useful in form.
Yeah, no, I'm just imagining sort of, yeah, it'd get very messy if we started doing things like that, I think, wouldn't it? Instead of invertebrates. That's, yeah. I've got another question about flies. What is the rarest fly?
We have no idea.
Yeah.
So I can tell, because the thing is, there could be millions of flies we don't know about. So whether they are, what's going on. So in the UK, one of our rarest flies is found in Scotland. It's found from one location. It's an anthomiid, and it's called the Fonseca seed fly. And this one is literally, it's one habitat. And of course, that's one habitat they want to build a golf course on.
Yeah.
So there's been lots of campaigns to look after and save this fly, and people are like, why? What's the value of a fly? And I'm like, well, what's the value of anything?
Yeah.
We're very biased in our conservation when we come to looking after things. People would just about like a butterfly or a beetle, but to ask them to like a fly, and it's like, no, but why should we bother? And it's like, what is the difference? What is the difference? And actually, in many of these cases, the flies are actually more ecologically useful to us than the butterfly or beetle.
Yeah. No, I think it's really telling how something that's pretty can get so much more.
These are pretty.
But they are pretty. Yeah, they are very pretty. They're very beautiful. I'm not going to forget that white powder puff of a bee fly. That's gorgeous. That's absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to ask you a question now. If you could tell us a little bit about your work, because you work at the Natural History Museum in London, but I know that you're not always inside the museum. Can you just tell us a little bit about the kind of research and things like that you do?
So I have just literally about half an hour. I think this is why the camera's not working, because it's taken one look at my appearance and gone, no, it's not going to work. So I have just come back from field work. So I've just spent the last 4 days in Hereford sweeping. So the last image you have is how one of the ways I will bring back flies to the collection.
So is that this one? Or
nope.
This one?
That one. Yeah.
Yes.
Annoyingly, there's a fly that's out of place there. So we've gone out and we've swept these flies, and then I will pin them, and if they're male, I will unhook their genitalia. So, for example, on the third row, third fly across, it's a dolly. Obviously, everyone knows it. It's a dolly copidae. I can't even say things now, sorry. And I've unhinged its genitalia. And that might seem a bit silly or a bit rude, but actually most of our identifications will go on that, because it's the part of the insect that evolves the fastest.
Okay.
And therefore we know if it's different, we've got different species. So we will go out in the UK and we will look at biodiversity. So we will do recordings of what flies are there, flies are over time, how they change, new habitats. But I will go around the world and we will describe new species. So I've collected in Peru and Honduras and Costa Rica and various places, Dominica, and there's a list long. And I will go through and we will try and figure out what these species are and whatever. But then we have other projects. So mosquitoes, so I'm very much involved with some mosquito projects. And some of these are one of my favourite ones recently. Involves the Sanger Institute just down the road from you in Cambridge. And we've been collecting the historical DNA out of mosquitoes that are up to 150 years old.
Wow.
Now, so we've kind of they have turned me into a glorified hairdresser. So we're bathing the specimens. So we're washing them and we're extracting this really fragmented DNA out of them. And you'd think by now all the DNA is just kind of collapsed into nothingness, because immediately the animals die, it starts fragmenting. But what these clever people have done have been able to reconstruct this DNA so they can replicate it and amplify it and suddenly build these genomes, the whole knowledge of this insect. So we can now start to go, where's this fly from? Where's its past? Tell us what's going on. And one of the things I find really funky is that we can look at its genes. So we can say, did it get impacted by insecticides? How has that impacted on it? But we've also been able to sequence the blood meal and tell you if it's carrying a malaria plasmodium or not. So we can suddenly look at how these things are spread, the epidemiology. You can ask all sorts of funky questions. But no, we are not making dinosaurs out of them.
Yes, Jurassic Park, not quite yet.
No.
No. Okay, another question I've got from our viewers is, what's the most colourful fly?
Oh, there's some amazing flies. So a lot of people will see the iridescent beetles or the iridescent butterflies. Exactly the same thing in flies, because what it's called is structural colour. So this is where across the exoskeleton there will be little dents, little grooves, everything. So when the light hits it, it splits these light waves, and so some colours are absorbed better than the others and reflected. So often you get these really funky looking metallic flies, and they're like totally bling. I mean, they're in the collection, you're like, whoa, look at these flies, wow. But in the nature, in, say, for example, a tropical rainforest, you cannot find these things. They are just like, they're hidden in plain sight because they glisten and so they sparkle and they just hide in the canopy. They could be flying around you and you're like, where are they? So you have these, and again, boffins are looking at this structural colour because it doesn't fade. It's not a pigment. It is amazing because it is a mechanical colour, and they're thinking they've been bio-inspired to kind of develop paints along a simple way of how these insects are doing it. And that's and I did it in my last book, the Radio 4 series, that I interviewed loads of people who are looking into these structural colours, and it is absolutely amazing. I don't think most people go head to head with a horsefly. But if you just take yourself some time and have a look at, because their eyes, they have what we call, amusingly, tiny nipples all over their eyes. And that's what splits the light waves. And so it gives them all these banding patterns.
Wow.
So, for example, we have some horseflies in the UK, and it's called the one-banded horsefly. And then we have the three-banded horsefly, because we're not very original with those names.
No.
But you can see, because of the eye patterns, it's amazing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, we've got a couple more questions as well. Oh, this one's another one to do with vision, actually, and eyes. So, other than being able to see the UV light, how does the vision of flies differ from other animals?
Massively. So yes, they see UVA, UVB, and UVC. So already it's like I can't. My brain is very simple. Okay, it is more simple than a fly, and I cannot visualize this. But if you imagine the eyes of any insect, and it's made out of tiny facets, right? And each of these is called an ommatidia. So they've got ommatidium all over it, and imagine that as a camera. So the most that flies will have is maybe 6,000-7,000 cameras per eye. However, that's where, and dragonflies can have maybe 36,000. So they've got loads of cameras going off. But what makes flies really funky is that those dragonflies, they have just one camera per ommatidia. Whereas in flies, they've split these cameras up down a cylinder. So they can take different angles of image. So they now have 6 black and white images and a fused colour image per camera unit. So those 6 now become 36,000, 42,000 with a colour. So this is why when you approach a fly, it is processing everything. It can totally see what's going on before you can. It's like being in the Matrix. It's like that. Everything slows down. You are perceived as a real lumbering idiot when you're going towards it, because they can process so quickly. But that's why they have to have pumps all over their body, because like us, if we don't clear the images fast enough, we become droopy and we become dopey. We're not figuring out what's going on. But can you imagine a fly? How many images are going on? So they have these amazing supercomputers processing all these images and dealing with everything. So there's some species, I know there's some species, I love this, of beetles that run so fast their brain can't cope, so they temporarily go blind. But flies, thankfully, aren't that daft.
Oh, yeah. I just love the idea of, I'm not a runner, so the idea of running makes me feel like I probably wouldn't want to see. We've got...
But actually, while we're still on eyes, let me go back to is it the fourth
the fourth
image
one? Yes, because that's a very cool looking fly.
Yeah, look here. So flies aren't just using their body parts to do normal stuff. They're using everything to flirt. Okay, and they are just the biggest flirts on the planet, and I think that's why I do like these cheeky little species. And this is a stalk eye fly, and now stalk eyes are amazing. So this is a male, it's obviously males, and it is grown its eyes on the end of stalks. So this fly is, I don't know, about 3 centimeters in width. Look at that, that's just eye stalks. This is Achias rothschildii, and it is just like bonkers. And it's amazing because when their optic nerve, when they're in the pupal case developing, you can see this optic nerve growing, and it grows in like concentric ring, like a spring. And when they emerge out of the pupal case, they engulf a lot of air and they blow their eyes up to these stalks. And they're amazing. And the boys use them to defend territories. So the ladies like ephemeral food sources, so decomposing wood, decomposing vegetation, whatever. So the males will leck over these sources. So just like their bigger relatives, the deer, where the males are like, headbutting each other, these lot are doing it on a very small scale. And most of the time they use their eye stalks to just determine who's bigger. Like, I've got a bigger eye stalks, nah. And they will defend the territory. But if they're similar size, they will start punching each other. Which is just, they're such idiots. But it's wonderful.
That's amazing. I've just got this image, like a cartoon of the eye stalks sort of popping out.
David Attenborough did a film of it in Life in the Undergrowth. Okay. So go back, and I mean, there's better films now because obviously technology. But I think I remember that, and it was so inspirational. It was like, what is going on here?
That is incredible. That is an incredible fly. I've got a couple more questions from our audience. I've got a question of what is the smallest fly? I'm guessing that might be another tricky one to answer because they get quite small, don't they?
They do get quite small. So the smallest insect is a little wasp.
Yeah.
But the smallest fly, hold on, I can tell you exactly. It's in my book. Where did I put them? Here we go. One of the second smallest fly, I believe, today is named in honour of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's not because it's so small, it's because it's got really muscly legs and it's a phorid. But the smallest one is another phorid. Where is it? Let me try and find it. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's
phorids, they're scuttle flies. Is that what they're also known?
Yeah, and obviously there's a big dude in Cambridge.
In Cambridge, yes. Henry Disney, yeah.
Henry Disney, who's an amazing man, absolutely amazing. And these flies are very hard to identify. I call them horrid phorids on purpose because it's really easy to get them to family. But then there's a genus, Megacillia, which is like, oh my gosh, and nearly everything's in it, and there's thousands, and you're like, how do I help? But
No, Henry's great.
He,
I remember one year we did a bio blitz and he named a new species of phorid that he found in
yeah,
Trinity College Gardens on this bio blitz. It was quite
he's
special.
he's extraordinary. I
Yeah,
mean, the man is a legend.
yeah,
We revere him. We call him the king of forests.
yeah.
Um, no, I can't find how small it is, I'm afraid.
That's
I'll
okay.
find it in a minute, but it's tiny.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Oh,
No.
here we go. So the Megapropodifora Arnoldi. So this is the tiniest species, and this is right. Where is it? I mean, it doesn't look like much. It has to be said. Don't tell Henry that I said that. Okay, so Brian Brown described this. He's the Prince of Forests, a new wingless female in 2018. The species because it measures 0.395 millimeters.
I can't imagine how small that is.
Yeah.
That's
So
very small.
yeah, it's got very bulging legs. So I had to
Yeah.
name this after Arnold Schwarzenegger, which makes me giggle.
Yeah. We've got a very popular question here. What is your favourite place to go to do field work?
Oh. So I have spent a lot of time around the world and I love it. But I have to say, I'm now a UK-ophilic. I'm back homely on ground in the UK. And I think it's because I'm seeing a change in the countryside. I'm seeing a movement. I'm seeing positivity and I'm seeing life coming back. And it genuinely makes me, oh, look, I'm grinning. You can't see it, but I'm grinning. And I've had several moments of running around the countryside today, just grinning at the countryside because it's just, I have hope. I really do have hope. And it's so, and the thing is with the UK, we know a lot of these flies, we know their names, but we don't know a lot about what they get up to. And so you can hear me walking along go, oh, that's where you live, or that's what you're doing. And it's so nice. We can add so much information to what we already know. And I think it's great.
It's really heartening to hear that things seem to be coming back, because we often hear about things like the insect crisis and insect Armageddon and everything's very doom and gloom. But there are things that we can do to help then.
It is very doom and gloom, and we have to do something about it. We cannot live without the insects. I mean, they can happily live without us, but if they go, we are absolutely, that's it.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. And what we've been recently discovering is that millions upon millions upon millions of insects migrate to our country each year. Yeah. It's like, and I love the idea of these flies traveling from Iran or Morocco or South Saharan Africa to get here going, hello, and on the way they're pollinating, and some of them are dying, so they're adding nutrient, and they're doing conservation work because they're doing gene flow from plant to plant, and then they're getting here and they're mixing with the locals. And when they mix with the locals, their little fecundity rates go right up. They have more eggs, way more eggs. And these eggs turn into larvae that are really useful. So some of them are eating our aphids, and some of them are organic hipsters, and they're recycling all the nutrients. And it's so nice to know we're beginning to see how interconnected everything really is. And so we've just got to look after everything. Yeah. Every place is very important.
Yeah. So I've got a couple more questions from our audience. One that actually links to that, I think. What plants are good for flies? This comes from Sunny. What plants are good for flies?
All sorts of plants. And this is the thing, because some flies have very long mouth parts, some flies have short mouth parts, and some are very specialists and some are generalists. But I would say, let's not maybe worry about the adult stage, but the larval stage. So what we lack in the UK a lot of is wetland habitats nowadays. We've got rid of so many ponds, but we've also got rid of hedges, and we've got rid of waste trees, decomposing trees. So we need these back in our landscape. So once, I've at home, I've just moved into a new place and I've dug a massive pond. It caused a lot of arguments, trust me. But we have now a big pond, and the life has come. And I know that there's loads of aquatic larvae that need these sort of things. We've got a massive compost pile. That's great. I've now 2/3 of the garden is no longer mowed. It is now just being turned back to see what nature does with it. So I love it. Apart from the physical bit of digging a pond, just be lazy.
Yeah.
Genuinely be lazy. Let nature go, do you know what? I've got this. And you can give it a little helping hand. You can throw some broken pots in the garden because lots of insects need those sorts of things. But apart from that, just let it be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One thing that I've really loved in Cambridge over the last few years is how many the vergers they let go wild these days, and like the wildflower meadow in front of King's College. I just think it's transformed King's College. Makes it look so much prettier. It's
that's the
great.
whole thing, is that you realise, how sanitised we were and how denuded the landscape was. Like our perception of like these heathlands and moorlands, which was like, that wasn't that lovely, and it's like, no, we've been terrible. Let's just let it go.
Let's go back.
And now you see all these wildflowers everywhere, and what I find amazing is the grasses. You've got all these different grasses, and you suddenly realise they're all different because you see them flowering, and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all these seed heads. This is amazing. And I think this is really good to make you realise there's a ton of stuff out there.
Yeah.
And we have to just start paying attention to loads of it.
Yeah. That's a really good thing to live by, I think. Got a couple of quite gruesome questions.
Bring it on, love it.
The first one, are there flies that are poisonous to other animals if ingested?
No, I don't think they're poisonous, and there's a lot of venomous flies.
Oh, yeah.
Which I love. Who doesn't like a good venomous creature? So flies fall in the neglected venomics groups because they haven't been studied enough. But basically, we are now realizing probably if it's a predator, it's going to be venomous because these have to subdue their prey. Okay, so the best ones are the robber flies. I love a robber fly. Most of the UK ones have a moustache, irrespective of sex, so that's nice. Little females with moustaches everywhere.
Yeah.
And these have got new venoms known to science. So they've got 10 new venom families known to science. Now we're looking at horseflies, mosquitoes. If you think how they can cope, it's because they're kind of injecting tiny little bits of venom. So there's a lot of these new venoms, and these may turn out to be medically very important.
Yeah.
So, but as for poisonous, I guess maybe some of the larvae, maybe?
Yeah.
Because if they're eating toxic plants, they will ingest that.
Yeah.
But I don't really know of many there,
Okay.
that way.
And then the really gruesome one, would flies eat all of my flesh and body parts if I die?
Yes. And that is really important. And now there's many reasons why this is important. I can't wait to become a maggot, I have to say, because it's recycling. Massively recycling. Now, I know this might be a quite bad thought, but imagine if our feces of our dead bodies, and when I mean all animal bodies, were not converted. Our planet would be revolting.
God, it would be,
absolutely revolting, because things like bacteria were producing it and things like that. The smell would be like, oh, hello. So we need these animals to get in there, and a fly can sniff a corpse from 9 kilometers away.
Wow.
And this is why we've been using them as detectives for thousands of years. So our first forensically important case using flies was 1,000 years ago in China, when there was a terrible incident in a village, and one of the villagers, quite gruesomely, so I won't go into it, killed one of the other villagers. And this magistrate, who'd obviously understood a little bit about forensics, and he wrote one of the first forensic textbooks, said, okay, bring out the scythes, bring out the sickles that they used to cut the hay. And they brought them all out, and they laid them out, and it was a hot day, and within an hour, one of them was absolutely covered in flies, because they could smell the tiny particles of blood. So they were able to incriminate this man, and he was like, oh my gosh, how did you know, blah, blah, blah. And so we have been using them ever since. And actually on my desk, which is a shame you can't see, I have the maggots from the first forensic entomology case in the UK, where he did a very dastardly deed. But the maggots were able to tell us what time he dumped the body in Scotland. Wow. And so we were able to incriminate him with that. So their ability to get in, and not only do they, if you're I'm hoping the person who just asked the question is very much alive. But there's maggots that we can use when he is alive to be helpful, because now we can use them for debridement therapy. And on our very own NHS, you can have maggots that will eat away at your horrible necrotic decomposing flesh to leave a very clean wound. And in eating away your rotten flesh, they will release enzymes which causes your skin to bind better, and it also releases enzymes that kill bacteria. So they're one of the few things that kill MRSA. So they're like little nature packages. They're just fantastic little things. So people get a little bit upset about maggots. Don't know why. So now they come in little tea bags, as it were, so they can be put on the flesh, so you don't have to see them.
Don't have to see them. But that maggot prescription, that's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. So I've got a couple more questions, and then I've got one that's a bit of a statement, but I think you'll know what to answer to it. So I've got one that says, "Hi, my name is Thomas. We have pet ducks, and there are lots of flies that the duckies eat. Is that good for them?"
Yeah, I mean, when I did my PhD, and our head of department was like, "You're just doing a bird food PhD, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Oh," and this again, because there's so many baby flies, the birds absolutely depend on them. So at the moment, I've just seen a load of house martins and swifts and swallows flying around, acting like idiots, and it's because they're feeding on all the insects flying around in the air, and most of those insects be the little flies. So the larval stage in the pond, you'll have loads of mosquito larvae, and everyone's like, no, not mosquito larvae, but everything loves them. Okay, they will be eaten by so many things. So they're really important for wetland birds.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So really great for your ducks as well. Do you have a favourite example of, and I think we might need to define this term, of symbiotic mutualism in flies?
Okay, so actually, okay. Well, it's a bit funny, and if you're ready for a quite silly story, it's called this fly called a terrible hairy fly, and this lives in a cave in Kenya, and there's one or two locations, and this basically lives off bat poo. So it cleans up all the bat poo. The larvae live in it, the adults live in it. They're doing a lovely job. So the bats are being like, their houses are being looked after, as it were, the caves. And the flies are like, yay, bat poo, this is fantastic stuff. And these flies are so hairy. I mean, they're not terrible. It's just a silly name that goes with them. And so they spend all their times rooming and cleaning and making sure everything's great. So they always make me giggle.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So symbiotic mutualism is where you get a couple of organisms that work together for their own, each other's advantage, really.
So there are cases where there's a nematode, which is, it's a very simple looking worm that lives in a gall created by a fly. So we're not quite sure what on earth's going on there, but these two seem to be getting on fine. I mean, obviously the plant's a bit annoyed because it's had to make a gall for these two, but it's just like, okay. So there's lots of examples of things living together and we're not quite sure. In the UK, there's hoverfly larvae that live in wasps' nests, and they eat the remains of the immature wasps. They are predators. They feed on lots of animal matter and things like that, but the carcasses and things like that, and these little hoverflies will go around eating all of that and will eat the wasp frass, so it's poo. So these are quite nice examples of these two living alongside each other in the UK.
Some really fascinating little interactions going on. So I've got one question and then our statement, because we're nearly out of time. So why do flies hover around poo is one of the questions that we've got.
So poo is a really good food source, whether you realise it or not. It's amazing. It's full of nutrients. Think about it. It's come through. It's basically just, in most of the large herbivores, things like that, it is just plant material that's had a beautiful bacteria added to it. So it's now nutritiously really rich. Now, poo is an ephemeral source. It will come and go. So with a lot of flies, the males get there immediately and try and guard its territory. Now, I know this because I've spent a long time looking at poo. And the males are there first trying to get in, but the females want the poo either to put a larvae in that eat the poo, or their larvae eat the other things eating the poo. I mean, there's a whole community going on in the poo. It is amazing. There's a great book by Peter Skidmore, and it's the invertebrate community of a cow dung pat. So if you're bored later, go and get yourself
have
this
a look
book,
at that.
and you can find out what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's lots of territory guarding. There's lots of feeding. There's hundreds of different species of fly that use this as a food source.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. That's brilliant. Yeah. But one of the videos I was going to show today was actually of our curator of insects dissecting a cow pat and looking at some of the invertebrates living in there. But we will share that on our YouTube channel as well. So I'm going to. I may have a couple of other questions that we may ask you afterwards, because I know that it's starting. It's 8 o'clock already, and I know that you've been so generous with your time today. But I have to ask this one, and I think it's because of what we put in our marketing. It says camel nostrils with 3 question marks.
Oh, I love these.
Yeah.
These are my favourite botflies. Okay. Now, there's 3 types of botflies. So there's the like the human one, it's a subdermal botfly, so it lives under the skin. Then there's the one I talked about earlier, the rhino botfly, that lives in the stomach of a rhino. So you've got the gastro botflies, you've got the skin, the dermal botflies, and then you've got what I affectionately call the snotbots. Okay, and you can guess where they live. So
Yeah.
these live in the throats and the nostrils of various big creatures. And one of them is the camel. So the camel, and it's got the silliest scientific name, and so you've got a family audience, I won't say it. But these are also like the reindeer botfly, and I love it. And so these flies, they do not feed as adults, and they would travel hundreds of kilometers chasing a reindeer herd. And what I love about them is that is why Rudolph had a red nose. And basically, that's why he didn't have any friends. It's not because of his personality. It's they knew that there was a botfly in his nostril.
That's going to be another side to my retelling of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And so I thought I'd finish up because, like I say, you've been massively generous, and thank you so much for doing this. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've loved hearing about these flies. I want to find out more. Are there any places where our viewers could find out more about flies? Because I know you've written a couple of books as well. Yeah.
So I've written 2 adult books, The Inside Out of Flies and The Secret Life of Flies. And then I've got some books on insects. There's the Bugs World, which heavily features flies. I don't know why. And then there's the Metamorphoses, which is the Radio 4 series. But there's loads of videos I've done online now, and loads. So you just look up podcasts, and I will actually tell you about Bill Sutherland, who was a professor at Cambridge. He's a superb man, and he has his own conservation stories online, little YouTube snippets of his things. And we keep getting together because we've done a lovely film on a dung pat where we went down to Knepp, the Wilding estate in West Sussex, and Sir Charlie Burroughs chased around a field waiting for a cow to defecate, and then we jumped on it, and then we found a dead deer, and we went through the carcass, and we had so much fun chasing and looking for flies. So do go look those, and then also go to the Dipterus Forum website, join up, and you can learn so much about flies.
Oh, thank you so very much, and thank you to all of our viewers as well for your questions. But I'll let you get back to your flies now, Erica. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's nearly it for the Zoology Live livestream for 2025, but the insect fun has only just begun. We have our family day on Saturday, June 21st, where you can go on a mini beast hunt, meet stick insects, make your own mini beast puppets, see talks by brilliant insect experts and more. It's going to be great. All the details can be found on our blog, museumofzoologyblog.com. Just click through the picture of insects on the top of the homepage. Thank you for joining us this evening and for your fantastic questions. We're going to leave you with one last film of studying insects in the field, this time in quite an unexpected place. Until I see you next time, happy wildlife watching.
Hi, my name's Ed Turner. I'm Curator of Insects in the University of Museum of Zoology in Cambridge. And we're here in a beautiful meadow just in the centre of Cambridge. And I wanted to show you some habitats you can search for insects. And it's not where you might be thinking, which is the grass or the trees behind. Rather, it's this, which is a cowpat, quite a fresh cowpat. But these can be fantastic environments for insects. And that's because they've got lots of different things that insects can feed on. Particularly things like dung beetles will lay their eggs on or in cowpats, or bring the dung away and lay their eggs there, and their larvae feed on the dung to develop. So what I thought we'd do is try and use two complex bit of kits, which is a sieve and a spoon, which are not from my kitchen, I promise. These are things I use to look for insects in cowpats. We're going to try and dissect it a little bit and see if we can find some cowpats, some insects in the cowpats. Found the cowpat already. So if I do this, I can actually see already, this is actually kind of quite an old one, so it's got a surface on top of it. And I can see, dog helping us here, I can see a little fly, and there was also an ant. Lots of things will be sitting on the surface here because it's quite warm. So insects on a day like this, when it's not really very sunny, will be using this just to warm up. But we're going to dig into it a little bit more and see if we can find some other things actually living inside. And I can see already there's some little holes on the top of the cowpat, which is where dung beetles got in, and we've got one straight away, look at that. See if I can not too disgustingly touch it, so I can get it out so I can show you. The beautiful dung beetle there, look at that. So straight away, I'm just going to use a little tiny bit. I'll wash my hands thoroughly afterwards, I promise, and I will not use this spoon. But there we are, look at that. It looks like it's dead, but it's not really, it's playing dead. Absolutely fantastic, beautiful adult dung beetle, and that will be in there looking for mates, laying its eggs, doing all of its dung beetle stuff. Hardly need to disturb the cowpat. But I'm going to look at that underneath as well, just a little bit, see if we can find some more. Get an idea of everything that's living in here. Look, there's another one, different species there. Gosh, it's actually hooching with life. Yeah. Another one, it's a bit covered in dung, but it's another beautiful dung beetle with these brown wing cases there, so different species. And then actually, I get underneath the surface here, you can see the grass is kind of yellowed because it hasn't got sunlight. There's bits of bare ground, but actually before, they can quite see this, but I can see right on the bottom here, other insects actually in amongst the grass on the bottom here. I can see a rove beetle, which is a bit like one of these devil's coach horses you sometimes see, but a really tiny one, and also little mites and other insects, which will all be feeding on this dung. It's absolutely teeming with life, a whole ecosystem just around this one very special habitat, which has come out of a cow's bottom. So there you go. So hopefully, what I'm going to try and encourage you to do with this sort of thing is really to think about what insects want, where they can be found in different environments. And even things like this, like a cowcat, can actually have absolutely tons of life, tons of insect life and other things living in it and on it and using it.